This meeting is being recorded.
Hey, everybody, it's Mike Young with aPlantBasedDiet.org. I'm outside in the cold winter of Naples, Florida right now. I've got coats on, but it's still above 50 degrees, believe it or not. And I know most of the United States right now is undergoing some extreme cold temperatures. And we're, of course, interviewing Dr. Rogers. We've had a few talks with Dr. Rogers here. And I want to get you up to speed real fast before he begins, because he's going to be talking about his part of his book, which is Food, Mood, and IQ. He's going to be talking about that here in relation to mental illness and psychiatric treatment, things like that. But Dr. Rogers, just so you know who he is, he's a practicing medical doctor in the Chicago area, so he's a lot colder. He's indoors right now, and he is an interventional radiologist, so he sees images of everything coming across his screens of everything that's going on right now in the medical establishment. So I'd say he's pretty much an expert and up to speed on everything that's happening. And, his insight is amazing, and he speaks the truth, which is something I really appreciate, because a lot of times, as we'll get into in this talk, there's a lot of other motivating factors that would cause someone to not focus 100% on the truth. But Dr. Rogers, very thankful that you do, and welcome. And how are things going there in Chicago?
How's life treating me like a baby treats a diaper? Nah, things are okay. Just it's a little cold out here. It's below zero, about 10 degrees below zero.
Oh my gosh! I mean, you have heat, so that's all you need.
Yeah, we're okay.
All right, so you're going to talk about some one of the chapters in your book and how it relates to psychiatric treatment in the medical industry currently right now, and of course the patients and their outcomes, which is the most important thing that we want to hear about, right?
Yep, yeah. I'll just show everybody the book. Here's the book. It's called Food, Mood, and IQ. And basically, psychology, psychiatry are a joke. About half of neurology is a joke. So I basically rewrote the textbooks. Let me get to the chapter here. So here's the book. I'll go to the chapter. Okay, so the name of this chapter is can you see it? I think I maybe have to share my screen to you.
Yeah, I gotta change the setting on here. Hold on a sec.
Okay. I'm gonna click on the share the screen button.
Participants. Yeah, I think we've encountered this before. I gotta make sure that I have this all set up for you.
Yeah, you got to enable me to share. So I'll just give a little background. My father was a psychiatrist, and he was kind of a big shot psychiatrist. He was chief of 2 departments in the local area. He was known as the best psychiatrist around. Growing up as a kid, he also saw patients in the home in the afternoons, and we were not allowed to open the door because quite often it would be somebody we knew as a patient for my father. Okay.
Can you share it now?
Yeah, I think it's working now.
There you go.
Okay, so let me go to the book here. Okay, so this is chapter 2 of the book, Food, Mood, and IQ. The title of the chapter is Who is the Crazy One? So I grabbed my father's shirt collar and tipped his chair over backwards. My left hand held him down. With my right hand, I took the plastic pill bottle and I pushed it into his mouth. And I said, if you ever try to make me take another pill, I will shove it down your throat. Do you understand me? Here's a picture of me when I was in college. I was a pretty strong guy. I set the all-time record at Stanford University for most wins in a season with 39. I wasn't a weightlifter, but I just got on the, just lifting weights. I could bench press, 345 pounds at a body weight of about 175. I was just a strong guy. Okay, so anyways, I was captain of the Stanford wrestling team there. Okay, it all started during my 3rd year of medical school. My estranged Juilliard professional musician girlfriend, who I love very much, gave me an ultimatum: either move with her to Europe or break up. So here she is. She was really nice, smart, and I should have married her. I really was happy with her, sort of like splendor in the grass. But, we started being pulled apart when I went out to Stanford, and she stayed back home, star-crossed lovers. And also, musicians and doctors don't really go that well together, because musicians perform at night. After a show, like let's say she was a musician in Les Miserables at the show. There's a cast party after the show. Doctors got to go to bed early. I got to wake up early in the morning to make rounds, do surgery the rest of the day. I was an imaging guided surgeon. And I also figured if I married her, there would be constant tension of her being expected to go to all the cast parties, me wanting to stay home to get up early in the morning the next day, and her constantly getting hit on by men when I'm not around, and her maybe eventually succumbing to that in exchange for favors with her career. She was gorgeous. I knew I loved her, and then, just being with her, I was happy. I wanted to marry her, but My parents thought the whole thing was just teeny bopper love, splendor in the grass, and that we'd grow out of it. And they knew and I knew I was destined to become a great doctor. I was the best student in my medical class of 333 students, 99% scores on my boards. I did everything you could want in a medical student. Okay, here's a picture of me in medical school. But something was wrong. I just didn't like it that much. I didn't know how to articulate it at the time, but there was something missing. I'd go through my clinical rotations, and there were some high moments like delivering a baby. But I noticed that most of the time we're making rounds, we're going in circles. The patients are not getting better. It wasn't like the Marcus Welby TV show where the patients made miraculous recoveries. It sort of seemed to me that we weren't helping the patients too much. And the attending doctors, the senior doctors, they were polite professionals, but they were surprisingly boring. Hardly did they ever tell an interesting joke or say anything interesting. It was more like being a little private, in a very hierarchical system. All orders were obeyed. You salute the rank above you. Chain of command was respected. But again, we had our role to play. And we did our duties, but it was mostly run for a short slide. We weren't accomplishing almost anything. I'm like, where are the cures? Where are the great achievements? Right. I was starting to sense that there was no way to excel. We were just like a generic cog in a giant assembly line machine for generating billing codes. I had even considered becoming a wildlife veterinarian. I shadowed this eccentric wildlife zoo vet named Perry Wolf, and it was fun. I could see, though, that there was such little financial resources devoted to that type of stuff that there would be few jobs. And if I went down that route, I'd be out in bumfuck Montana putting electronic ear trackers on tranquilized beasts, and nobody would want to pay for any of the advanced imaging, interesting stuff. So after taking zoology and animal husbandry classes, I reluctantly let go of the wildlife veterinarian dream. Truth be told, I was disillusioned with the environmental movement. I'm kind of giving a little backstory, so how things came to what came to pass. Yeah. I went into wildlife biology at Stanford, went to all the national parks like Yellowstone, bird watching, Ansel Adams photography, and enjoyed all that stuff. Like, here's a typical Ansel Adams photography. This one's from the Teton Mountains. Okay. And I had friends, we were into all this stuff, and they were going to be wildlife biologists. Me too. Okay. I wanted to be better than my father. I can be better than a doctor. I can be a wildlife biologist. That's cooler than being a doctor. That was what I was going through at that time. But what turned me off was the environmental biologists. They didn't just love nature. They sort of hated people. They were always against the farmer. They wanted to take the land away from the farmer. They would say things like wildlife management isn't about managing wildlife. It's managing people. The people are ruining the land. We need to get them off the land. And I'm like, you know what? I trained at Iowa State, for wrestling for a summertime. And I met a lot of farmers and I liked them. And I had friends that were farmers and I was friends with their kids. And I didn't like the environmentalists always bad-mouthing the farmers. And plus, they make food for us, okay? They're pretty nice, honest, hardworking people. So this is just another one of my failed adventures that's kind of pushing me towards medicine. So even though I didn't really want to be a doctor, everything else I tried just didn't work out. I was really good at chemistry, and I liked advanced synthetic organic chemistry intellectually. But I go to the synthetic lab, and everything smelled like paint. I hated it. So I decided not to be a synthetic chemist, and I was, getting back to medical school, I was just sad because I didn't really like med school much. I was giving up the thing I loved, this girl, in exchange for something that I really didn't love. Like, it seemed to me like a boring job as a doctor, just to please my parents, make money. And it was much more monotonous than I had expected.
So my Dr. Rogers,
yeah.
back then you could tell, even when you were in school, that the average doctor didn't have high success rates with their patients.
Yeah, it was sort of like we were just spinning our wheels, and you didn't see patients saying, I'm better now, thank you so much. You just didn't see that. And it was kind of weird. And we were just going around, going through the motions, but nothing was really happening. And so when I was a kid, I kind of idolized my father. He was double-boarded psychiatrist, chief of 2 departments. He made tons of money. He was valedictorian of his high school. When he was in college, he won an Irish English boxing championship. He was a tough guy, smart guy. And, he never lied to me once. In terms of like regular stuff, he sometimes made mistakes, but he never lied on purpose. I loved and admired my father. I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be a student athlete, so I was a wrestler instead of a boxer because I didn't want to get head trauma. And then, at Stanford, I had great coaches, world and Olympic champions. Mark Schultz was a 3-time NCAA champ. And the Schultz brothers really helped me a lot, with school and with everything, learn from them on how you get great at something. And also, getting back to home, my mother was great. My mother, she also supported my father totally. She would say things like, your father is so smart. Your father works so hard. Be quiet. Your father is sleeping. He has to be at work early in the morning. And the house really ran well. My parents were married their whole life. They're very happy. And I think it's because they were complementary. They didn't compete with each other. My mom did the mom stuff. My dad did the dad stuff. And everybody was happy. Okay. My dad was like the king of the family. My mom was the queen. We had a very happy family. And I was the best student of the kids. And everybody expected me, to become a doctor like my dad. It just seemed like the natural thing. Right. And every morning my dad went to work early, came home in the afternoon, see private patients in our house. Like I said, we couldn't open the door because they were often people we knew. He had a very good reputation as an excellent psychiatrist. After his last patient of the day, he'd take the dog for a walk, and then he would eat dinner, and then he would read some books. And I would often talk to him about books. And he always listened to classical music or Irish music. And I liked talking to him about history, philosophy. We'd go to the bookstore once every 3 months or so, and he'd buy about 10 books. I'd buy about 5 books. And I felt privileged to go on these trips and talk with my dad. And he had, my uncle would sometimes come over, who was kind of a jerk, and they would argue about books. And I'd argue with my uncle, and I really wanted to be like them. And I would read books in advance of a holiday coming up so I could argue with my uncle. He liked to kind of egg me on.
Right. So, well, it sounds like it was intelligent discussions you were having.
Yeah. That's where I think I got my best education, not in school. When I was a young guy, was from, reading books and being ready to argue about things, argue about the Vietnam War, argue about, other things. So my dad was kind of like my hero. He was kind of my role mate, my role model, I unconsciously sort of designed my life around his in a sense. But getting back to the med school dilemma, my dad noticed that I was sad about losing my girlfriend. And he said to me, Peter, I think you are depressed. I said, no, Dad, I'm just sad. I gave up the woman I love for a career that so far seems tedious, boring, and kind of stupid. He's like, Peter, there are lots of other girls. You will find a good one. Medicine is an excellent profession. You have been sad for too long. I think you should take an antidepressant medication. I said, no, Dad, I'm just sad. It's not a big deal. Most people go through heartbreak at some time in their lives. I know that I have greatness in me. It's just been harder than I thought to figure out what's the best path for me in medicine. I can't figure out what specialty I want to go into. I can't even see a clear path for me to like this and enjoy it and have a good career. I'm frustrated by that. Until I figure that out, Dad, I'm going to be sad. That's just how it is. And I miss her. Okay. I was in love with her. It's just the way it is, Dad. That's part of life. And he's like, Peter, you've been sad for too long. I have a lot of experience with this sort of thing. I think you are depressed. I think you need to take an antidepressant. I said, Dad, sometimes people are just sad. That is normal. I'm sad for a good reason. Leave me alone. My dad, there's a new drug called Prozac, which has great results in clinical trials. I want you to take it. I have some pills here, and I want you to take them. You need to take them for a couple of weeks before you will notice a beneficial effect. So I loved my father, and I knew he loved me. I had confidence in him, and I trusted him. It seemed crazy for me to take a medication. I had never taken a medication before except tetracycline antibiotics for acne. I said, look, Dad, I'm willing to take it because you say so, but I don't think I really need it. I wasn't afraid of pills. I had studied pharmacology in med school and constantly heard how wonderful all these drugs were. I knew that it was all so simple. You just match the ill to the pill and send the bill. So I started taking Prozac. It's also called fluoxetine. A couple of weeks had gone by and I was not happier. I noticed that I was becoming angry. I didn't know why, but I was. I also noticed that my sex drive had sort of disappeared. The nurses didn't seem as pretty as they used to. I had no interest in spanking the monkey. My dad noticed that I had become irritable, which was a new thing for me. He said, I think the Prozac has unmasked a bipolar disorder. I think you are bipolar. I think you should also take lithium. Lithium is a very good medication. I have lots of patients on lithium. I said, me? Bipolar? That's ridiculous, Dad. I just don't like this Prozac medication. It makes me angry. Peter, give it time. Prozac has great results in clinical studies. I have lots of experience with this. This is a common thing for bipolar disorder to be unmasked when a person is treated for depression. I have some lithium pills for you. I want you to take these pills. You need to give them a couple of weeks before you will start noticing the beneficial effects. And you told me you weren't sleeping as well as you used to. Sometimes the Prozac can cause insomnia. I want you to also take a benzodiazepine. This is Xanax. That will help you to sleep. I was starting to lose my patience with him, but I figured maybe he's right. He knows this sort of thing a lot better than I do. He does this every day. It doesn't seem right, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for a few weeks and see what happens. If nothing else, this will be an interesting clinical experience. At that young age, I was too naive to actually open a book or a journal and start reading about Prozac, lithium, or benzodiazepines. I just trusted my father. But I kept feeling worse. I became sadder and angrier. I was losing control of my emotions. I could hold it together and hide it from people at work, but at home, it was difficult and I was getting worse. Back in those days, I kind of thought my mother was stupid. She was just a housewife. I never saw her read a book. I loved her and I thought she was funny in a kind of crazy Puerto Rican way. She's from Puerto Rico. She had a degree from University of Chicago as a social worker, master's degree. She never read a book. She didn't participate in the conversations with my dad and my uncles, about books, history, and philosophy. She had quit working after the kids were born. My dad made plenty of money for everybody. So when I first come home from California, and I was in California at Stanford for college and went to med school in Illinois, in Chicago here. I was living at home, and my mom would say things to me like, Peter, you study too much. You are a nerd. Why don't you date Linda at the tennis club? She is very nice. She would be a good wife for you. I say, and so my mom, when I was a third-year medical student, my guard was down. She could see my emotions. She said, Peter, what's wrong? Why are you so sad? And I said, Mom, these pills that Dad's making me take, they're not helping me. They're making me worse. I bounce back and forth between being angry and sad. When I'm angry, I feel like punching Dad in the face. When I'm sad, I feel like committing suicide. She goes, Peter, don't talk that way. Don't you talk that way. If you die, then I don't want to live. If you think you are going to commit suicide, I want you to kill me first. If you are dead, then I don't want to live. I mean it. Kill me first. I said, Mom, I'm sorry. I never felt this way until I started taking those pills. I was just sad then. Now I feel like I'm going crazy. I want to stop taking these pills. My mom said, let me talk to your father and see what he says. You know your father loves you and he wants the best for you. I said, okay, Mom. So the next day my mom comes back and she says, your father says you need to stay on the pills for a couple more weeks before the benefits will become noticeable. I said, Mom, I've been on these pills enough weeks. Let me think about it. That weekend, I confronted my father. I said, Dad, I've had it with these pills. I'm not taking them anymore. Dad, that would be a mistake. You need to stay on them a couple more weeks and then you will start feeling better. Maybe I should put you on a second antidepressant. Maybe I should also put you on a tricyclic antidepressant. They can be complementary with the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. I just read an article saying that you can get sometimes a synergistic benefit when you combine Prozac with the old-fashioned antidepressants like nortriptyline.
Dr. Rogers,
Yes.
I've got a question, two questions. Number one is approximately what year was this was happening?
Gosh, this was about 1990.
Okay. And the other question is, I didn't see your dad mention this, but some of the things I've heard over that time frame have been like these pharmaceuticals are being used to correct a chemical imbalance in your body, in your brain.
Right. They believed in the neurotransmitter imbalance theory.
Yeah,
that was what they believed in.
So is that what your dad is doing here? Is adding more pharmaceuticals to
he
adjust
basically
the
hook,
balance?
line, and sinker believed all the stuff coming out of the Ivy League medical centers on psychiatric drugs.
Okay.
And he's basically following me around the house, trying to get me to take drug after drug. And so I said, Dad, I don't think you understand what's going on. I'm beginning to think you don't know what you're talking about. I'm beginning to think these psychiatric drugs are fucking bullshit. Dad, why do you say that? Me, I hate these drugs. They make me feel like I'm losing control of my thoughts. They're making me worse. Dad, what do you mean? I said, do you really want to know how they make me feel? My dad, yes. I said, they make me feel like I want to kill you. My dad, Peter, me, you can take your fucking drugs and shove them up your ass. You don't know what you're talking about. Everything you told me about these drugs has not come true. Nothing good happens. I only feel worse and worse. Dad, you feel bad because you are depressed and because you are bipolar. Fuck you. I am not depressed and I am not bipolar. I'm just sad because my girlfriend moved away and I don't like medical school. That's a normal reaction. Dad, but Peter, you have mental illness. Depression and bipolar are mental illness. Me, fuck you. Stanford is the best student athlete college in the world, and I was student athlete of the year at Stanford. That means I'm one of the best student athletes in the world. I am the best medical student in my whole class of 333 students. If I have mental illness, then everyone has mental illness. If mental illness makes me this smart and strong and good, then everyone should have it. I coached 2 wrestling teams. They both had their best seasons ever in their history, the high school and the local college. My dad, Peter, You're being grandiose. That's a sign of bipolar. Me, fuck you and fuck your phony diagnosis. You are a fraud. You don't know what you're talking about. Anytime I say something good about myself, you say I'm bipolar and grandiose. Anytime I say I'm sad about something, you say I have mental illness. You make it impossible for me to just be myself. Sometimes the people are happy, sometimes they're sad. Leave me the fuck alone. You go around spouting off all your bullshit and it's not even true. You're the one that has mental illness. I'm just trying to live my life. You're chasing me around the fucking house trying to poison me. Fuck you. Dad, I know you mean well, but you don't know. You don't know what you're doing. I am never going to take these drugs again. Peter, you can't stop taking these medications all of a sudden. You could have a severe withdrawal effects. Just give the pills a few more weeks. Me, fuck you. I grabbed my father by his shirt collar and I tipped his chair back and with my left hand, I held him down. With my right hand, I took the pill bottle and I shoved it in his mouth and I said, if you ever try to make me take another pill, I will shove it down your throat. Do you understand me? And then here's a paper about Prozac, a more recent paper from 2017. The antidepressant fluoxetine induces necrosis by energy depletion and mitochondrial calcium overload. It inhibits the mitochondria. It kills brain cells. They're recommending to use it for cancer chemotherapy. That's how freaking toxic it is. Okay?
Dr. Rogers, when that incident happened with your father, was that the last you had anything to do with those psychiatric medications?
Yeah. I never took another pill. I quit all of them cold turkey. I never took another pill. I was lucky. I didn't have any withdrawal side effects. I know some people have very severe withdrawal side effects, but I didn't have any. Yeah. And I never went back to that. And I've never, ever taken another psychiatric pill in my life. The whole thing was insane.
Very good.
My father was crazy.
Well, it sounds like you weren't on it for very long, right? It wasn't that long of a period of time.
No, I think the whole time course was maybe about 3.5 months, something like that. Because he kept on saying a couple more weeks. You know, it was like that one movie about the guys who fix up houses. 2 weeks, just a couple more weeks, couple more weeks. And all of a sudden, which is really a very dangerous thing to do because they keep you on those things long enough until you will develop side effects. They're bullshit, okay? Psychiatric drugs are BS. The whole thing is a big fake.
You mentioned mitochondrial inhibitors. I know that's been a big theme of a lot of the work that you've done, and that's been a big problem across the board with people and their health, correct?
Yeah, the most important thing the brain needs to do is generate tons of energy. So you're giving them a drug that inhibits their energy production. It's totally freaking stupid. There's a couple world famous psychiatrists. One of them is by the name of Peter Breggin. Another one's by the name of Grace Jackson. And there's other ones will tell you the exact same thing. Every psychiatric drug causes a gradual, slow, progressive lobotomy. Actually, the antipsychotics will cause a rapid lobotomy. They're chemical brain poisons, okay? The whole thing is insane. The single neurotransmitter per disease theory is totally bogus. It's never been proven. They've never found a neurotransmitter imbalance in any of the psychiatric diseases. It's the drugs will secondarily cause a neurotransmitter imbalance, and you'll actually have less chance of recovering to normal. The antidepressants cause an increased rate of suicide. The whole thing is a crock of BS. It's a fraud, okay? The reason it continues is because it's worth, billions of dollars to sell these drugs.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any side effects. I never had a recurrent episode of depression or so-called bipolar. I went on to graduate first in my medical school class. While I was in medical school, I also wrote 2 books, one about Medical Student's Guide to Top Board Scores. I also wrote a book on Spanish for healthcare professionals. My mom helped me with part of that. We recorded an audio version of it. Here is a book. The dean wrote the foreword for it. I was really good friends with the dean. And he said, I'm very proud of you. You're a great person. You're going to be a great doctor. The world would be a better place if more people were like you. The dean loved me. He wanted to adopt me as a son. I was friends with him. I really liked him a lot too. My father basically was such a conformist lightweight that he believed all the BS coming out of the Ivy League drug dealer. Because in the Ivy League, they have to promote drugs. That's how they get grant money, and that's how they get publications, and that's how they get promoted. Okay. So like I said, my dad has chased me around the house trying to poison me. He almost killed me. Okay, here's me at medical school graduation. That's my father. My father meant well, and he was a good guy, but I just think intellectually he's a fucking lightweight that he just believed everything he read. It was in his interest to do so. The more drugs he prescribes, the more money he makes, but he actually believed it and nearly, poisoned and killed his son. That's my mother, and, thank God for my mom's common sense. Helped me to,
well, Dr. Rogers, with your dad, was he focused on results in terms of getting patients better, or was there never any results? They were always on different pharmaceuticals ongoing.
Well, I think what happens is that some of the patients get better on their own and they attribute it to the drugs. But when you start comparing them with placebos, there's a doctor by the name of Hirsch who wrote a lot about that. When you start comparing them with placebos, the patients on placebos do better in the long run.
They do.
Okay? The whole thing is BS. It's absolute BS. And so, like, you look at the great psychiatrist, look at the guy Bregan. He says, I never prescribe psychiatric medications unless I'm helping a patient to withdraw and I gradually taper down the dose. Okay. I read through Grace Jackson's book. She goes through all the pathophysiology and stuff. It's much worse than anybody can imagine. They're poisons. Okay. You don't get to health by poisoning yourself. Okay. You get to health by trying to do everything right as best you can. I completed a surgical internship, and the chief of surgery repeatedly wanted me to become a general surgeon. That's an open, procedure surgeon. I actually had planned on going on becoming an imaging guided surgeon, interventional surgeon, interventional radiologist. It's called, doing imaging guided surgery. They're less invasive. And radiology residency, I had 99% board scores. Had a new girlfriend. I was a lot happier. She wasn't like the old one, but she still making me happy. And like I said, I know my dad loved me and he was supposed to be the best psychiatrist around, but he was a phony, a fraud. They all are, because it's not the way to treat these illnesses. Okay. And most of these illnesses are bogus. If you read the DSM, it's a joke. It's just made up as a way to put patients into categories so you can sell them drugs.
I have a question for you, Dr. Rogers. We talked before this video about the about lifestyle medicine concepts, the 6 pillars, because we kind of do a lot of our work around that, which are just habits, right? And they're just habits. They're good habits. I think there, one's plant-based nutrition, then there's physical activity, stress management, avoidance of risky substances, restorative sleep, and social connection. So those are the 6. And it seems like if you do most of those things right, you concentrate on it, you're going to be in a good mental state. But when you start to move away from those, it's going to affect your mental health negatively. And I guess what I see is that probably what you've seen, which is the industry relies on pharmaceuticals, which don't address those better habits that folks should have, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you look at drugs, there's like about 4 categories. Number one, there are replacement drugs. Like if you have type 1 diabetes, you need to replace insulin. If you're hypothyroid, you need to replace thyroid. Those drugs work pretty well. Number 2, you got antibiotics. And antibiotics, they can be useful, but they also have a lot of side effects and they're overused, but they can be useful. And then the third category of drugs is the main category of drugs. They're metabolic poisons. All these things like antidepressant or antihypertensive, anti-cholesterol drugs, they're all just metabolic poisons. And what I'm saying is, you don't get to health by poisoning yourself. You get to health by eating the right food and doing all the things you talked about, your pillars of health.
Yeah.
And the other thing I realize now that I got more experience, was I call it doctors aren't trained in NETs, N-E-T-S. N is for nutrition, E is for epidemiology, T is for toxicology, and then S is all the sort of like social stuff. Do they have social support? Do they have a sense of purpose in their life? Spirituality, religious people are a lot healthier. Are they sedentary versus active? Exercising? Do they get some sunshine? Yep. All of that stuff makes a person happy and healthy.
And
that's never talked about.
Dr. Rogers, like, I'm out here in Florida. One of the reasons I'm here in Florida right now is because it's much warmer. Okay, I feel like I'm not in a hibernation state, but also it's not a sunny day today, but there's a lot more sun. The sun's more intense down here in the wintertime, and the days are longer. And I feel like that also does affect my health, in a way.
Yeah, there's one thing called seasonal affective disorder. Having a longer day tends to increase a person's mood. Number 2, everybody knows you get more vitamin D. But number 3, you have nitric oxide precursors just beneath your skin, subcutaneous tissues. And that's why you feel good when you walk out in the sun, because those subcutaneous nitric oxide precursors are released and you vasodilate your whole body and you just get this nice feeling, good blood perfusion. It makes people look good too, because they got better perfusion of their skin, a glow of vitality. You also have a mechanism to make some sulfates. I don't remember exactly how it works. There's a lady named Senef who talks about it, but the gist of it is being that it helps to replenish the sulfate negative charges on your endothelial glycocalyx. So basically the lining of your arteries have a negative charge, in large part due to sulfates, because sulfates have a negative charge on them, and that's called a zeta potential that repels red blood cells from sticking to them, so you don't want to unnecessarily form clots. The gist of it is it improves arterial health. So there's a lot of good things that come from sunshine. It's more than just the vitamin D. You can't replace it with just a vitamin D pill.
Yeah, so like that's why when you and I have had some interviews a couple times, I'm outside. I try to be outside as much as I can. I don't understand the full science like you just explained, but it does seem to make sense, because I definitely feel a benefit from it.
Yeah, and there's other stuff too. One of the things I called forest bathing, something about being in the woods, the smell even has these therapeutic beneficial effects. It's sort of, I think, nature rewards us for doing things that are good for us. And yeah, so it's nice to get time outside. It's sort of, we're made to live outside. And there's something called a hype and bust cycle of industry funded research by Nelson. Okay, so basically, when a new product comes out, it gets maximum hype. Usually there'll be a bogus fake research study and they hype that up to advertise it. A little time goes by and people start realizing, well, gee, it really doesn't have as much benefits as we thought. And then a little more time goes by and they start seeing that it actually has side effects and negative things. So when Prozac came out, everybody thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Okay. And my mom was, played tennis at the tennis club. Okay. And my father had all these free samples of Prozac. So my mom's friend said that she was sad. And my mom took Prozac and gave free samples to her friend. And she goes, oh, my friend, she was sad, but now I gave her some Prozac. She's doing fine. I go, Ma, you shouldn't be doing that, but I'm just giving you a sense. That's how crazy it was back in those days.
I remember they call them happy pills, right?
Yeah, there were the happy pills. And, there was this whole idea of, better living through chemistry. These drugs are like magic. And they thought it got hyped so much in the preliminary clinical studies, trials, that they thought it was great. But it turns out to be, a total freaking poison that now is recommended for chemotherapy. It's ridiculous. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so that's basically it. So that was kind of the point I wanted to make, was that those drugs are toxic and they're dangerous and they really can kill you. And also, I wanted to also mention the idea of upselling psychiatry. So first of all, he tries to poison me with an antipsychotic SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, Prozac. And then he starts saying, well, gee, you're not sleeping because of the drug. Now we got to put you on a benzodiazepine, Xanax, because you're not sleeping. Okay. So now you're on 2 drugs. And then the drug doesn't work. So it goes, well, gee, it's not working as well as we had hoped. Let's put you on another antidepressant. Maybe there'll be a synergistic benefit. It's like, get the F out of here. Okay. But you can see how real quickly the patient's on 3 drugs. There'll be a new side effect. Now you're on 4 drugs. And I had rotated through psychiatry as a medical student, and I saw it was routine for patients to be on 3, 4, 5 drugs. Polypharmacy, and they keep getting more side effects, more brain damage, and they just slowly go down the tubes. And then the doctors are like, oh, well, that's what it happens,
Yep. Hey, Dr. Rogers, can you cancel the screen share? That way you can get onto the regular video here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to comment on that because you and I talked before this as well, that I've seen a lot of these psychotropic medications. They say right on the bottle, do not consume alcohol while drinking this. And I will tell you, I've known so many people over the years with similar psychiatric diagnosis that end up getting on these pharmaceuticals that say not to drink alcohol. And almost all of them are constantly drinking alcohol. So I've always thought, well, if they're trying to address some chemical imbalance, how is taking a depressant voluntarily, AKA alcohol, how is that factored into the equation? Usually when the doctor doesn't even know that the patient's doing that.
Yeah, I think a better way to refer to these things would be synergistic poisons. Okay. These are poisons. They are poisoning your normal neurologic function. All right. And so the more of them you add up at the same time, the more likely you're not just going to damage a brain cell, the more likely you're going to kill the brain cell and, cause permanent damage. So luckily, I very much wanted to be as smart as I could be. And I had a fear intrinsically of any neurological drug. So it was the only reason I got pushed down this path was because I loved, admired, respected, and trusted my father. But, in retrospect, I shouldn't have, but I did at that time. But I consider all these things poisons. There's a lot of stuff that nobody knows about. For example, there's something called soteria, Soteria. And it's a Greek word. It means deliverance. All right. And I mentioned in the context of schizophrenia, there's all these powerful drugs for schizophrenia called antipsychotics. Well, there was this guy by the name of Lauren Mosher, and he was like the head psychiatrist for research in the whole United States. And he had noticed the patients that don't get drugs do a lot better. So he tried putting these people into residential housing with no drugs. Okay, they did this in San Francisco, later in Pennsylvania area. And the ones who got no drugs for schizophrenia, 85% of them were able to return to a regular life. Whereas the ones who were drugged with these antipsychotics like Haldol and all those types of things, only 15% of them could return to what we would consider a relatively normal life, living independently, potentially getting married or having children, holding a job.
Well, how's one of the pillars of lifestyle medicine is physical activity. So wouldn't you say that taking these pharmaceuticals would reduce someone's desire to go out and run or walk or whatnot? So because they're not getting exercise every day, of course, that's in my mind the best antidepressant there is. Then they're also not going to be tired. They're not going to sleep well. It starts like a whole cycle, right? That they can't get out of, it seems like.
Yes, yes. It basically does the opposite of what you want to do. If you think about it, a lot of people, once they start eating a low-fat vegan diet, they have more energy. They start running marathons, 10Ks,
Yeah.
triathletes, and all this stuff. That's a common thing when people go vegan. Okay, with this drug, think about this drug. It does the opposite. It inhibits mitochondria. So it inhibits your energy production system in your brain. So it'll make you more sort of dull, lethargic, and the response I got is it made me angry. I was mad. Yeah, I didn't even know why. I was just angry. Like I said, I was mad at my father. And I think that's an unrecognized side effect. I think a lot of people who do very bad behavior that they shouldn't be doing are because of those drugs. That doesn't get reported, but in the newspapers or the TV, but that's a very common situation. I think most of those people you hear about doing terrible behavior, it's because they're on those drugs. They make you angry and you don't even know why.
I remember hearing that out in the news somewhere, saying that one of the antidepressants actually caused an increase in suicide rates.
Yeah, it did. It caused an increased suicide rate. It caused an increase in violent behavior, all kinds of bad things. Another thing, getting back to the exercise, the way the brain works is the brain actually has a system to tell time. And there's something that if you put a patient on a functional MRI table, have them close their eyes, and you just ask them, so what you thinking about? Most of the time, they're going to say, well, I'm thinking about some people in my life, my relationships, my wife or my kids or my parents, whatever. And they're time traveling. They're thinking about what happened yesterday, then they're thinking about what they're going to do later today or tomorrow. Okay. So the brain, there's something called the default mode network in the center of the brain, and it becomes active on functional MRI when the patient has their eyes closed. Because social relationships and social support are very important to us, our default setting when we are not busy is to think about the people in our lives. Okay, so what am I getting at is that form of time travel through the center of the brain, the default mode network, is between the past and the future. You're constantly analyzing old situations to decide what to do in the future. Okay, well, the relevance is that you can only concentrate on one thing at a time, your conscious mind. Your subconscious mind can concentrate on tons of stuff. It's far smarter than your conscious mind, but your conscious mind can only concentrate on one thing. So you're either in the time travel mode, or your default mode network, which is in the center of your brain, or you're in what's called the task-based network on the periphery of your brain. All right. So when you exercise, you get into the moment. If you're running, you got to pay attention to your next step so you don't trip.
You have to.
You immediately so basically somebody who's unhappy is usually they're sort of obsessing about some negative event or negative emotion, versus you get them exercising. Now they're just in the present and they're focusing on, taking their next step as they run through the woods, for example. So by bringing them into the present, you make them happier. And that can also be why sometimes when a person's sad, they're happy just to be working. Because when they're working, again, they get into the moment, whatever their job might be or a physical task. And being in the present gets them to stop obsessing about what they were ruminating on before. And like you said, too, when you exercise, you actually build energy because your mitochondria, they go through what's called mitochondrial biogenesis. They form new mitochondria. So you increase your energy production capacity in your muscles and in your brain. You get mitochondrial biogenesis in the brain as well. So you increase your capacity for activity. So it builds you up and it makes you sleep better, like you said.
Okay, what about, you mentioned the past, the present, and the future. What would you say to the idea that if you're depressed, your mind is focused on the past? If you're anxious, your mind is focused on the future. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I mean, basically, you want to try to focus your mind on something good, something useful, something true. And it can be true. It can also be the case, yes, sometimes you're having a hard time getting your mind off something. Like you can't get a song out of your head. You just keep hearing the lyrics over and over. But again, that's why you want to try to do something good or be around something good that pulls you into a better way of thinking, a more useful, positive way.
Okay. Well, also, we talked before this video about a cruise. Our nonprofit just did a cruise called the Health Optimization Cruise. In case all you all don't know, I'm 54 years young, so I've been around the block a little bit, not quite as much wisdom as you have, Dr. Rogers, but I've been through these periods of times, like growing up in the 70s and 80s, seeing the progression, things like that. One of the things that we did, my wife and I, who's also 54, we gave a talk on how to optimize your mental health. And of course, I'm not coming at this from a medical perspective. I'm coming at it from a habit-based perspective. And, a lot of the things, like I said, I see a lot of the people that have these diagnoses, a lot of common themes. They're not exercising every day. They're not getting that vigorous aerobic exercise. They're taking depressants like alcohol, right? They don't have good social connections. They're not sleeping well. Usually they're not sleeping well because they're not tired, because most of us sit in front of screens all day, so we don't get tired, based on the lifestyles now. So we were just kind of given all these observations to folks at our event and saying, like, I don't understand, why isn't all of that being addressed at the medical level? Like, I understand if someone has a severe breakdown, they've got to be maybe get some pharmaceuticals temporarily to get them okay, right? And then once you get them okay, then start all these habit-based therapies. Why don't they do that for the most part?
Okay, well, I think, like I said, there's two fundamental worldviews. One worldview is atheistic Darwinism. That is the dominant view in the high school, college, medical school, and professional world in the United States. The national religion of the United States is atheistic Darwinism. That's not by accident. Okay. Mm-hmm. The other view is sort of a Bible-based perspective in terms of the big view where you say man is created in the image of God, therefore part divine, therefore entitled to our best effort, therefore we should not abuse him. This is highly relevant because let me ask you a question. I'll just ask you a random question. How about I offered you $1,000 to poison a child? Would you do it?
No,
you wouldn't do it. Okay. Most people would not poison a child for $1,000. How about if I offered you 10,000? No, you wouldn't do it, okay? That's the normal answer of a sane person, okay? The medical profession does it all day long, okay? Think about it. Attention deficit, those drugs cause bad long-term outcomes, and they routinely give them a secondary diagnosis, put them on more pills. They routinely poison people all day long with drugs that don't work because there's money in it. And what I'm trying to say is if you love somebody, you don't do it. That's why you could have two parents that are completely illiterate, but they're going to do better for their kid than, the Harvard doctor because the parents love the baby. They don't care about the money. They love that kid. They want to do what's right by him. And what I'm trying to say is the medical system hates the patient. It wants to make money. It doesn't exist for the patient. All the patients, anybody listening to this, you need to get this out of your head. No one gives a rat's tail about you. No one cares about you at all, okay? They don't even consider you to be a human necessarily. They consider you in atheistic Darwinism to be an ape that talks, okay? You have no intrinsic rights. You have no intrinsic value. There is no God. Life has no meaning. There is no afterlife. That is the moral foundation of medicine, okay? The purpose of a medical clinic is not to help patients. It is to sell drugs, okay? At the end of the day, every hospital and every clinic has a bean counter, and the bean counter compares all the doctors and says, how many beans did you sell today? How many billing codes did you generate? So the doctors are under tremendous pressure to go as fast as possible and crank out those billing codes to make money. Because if they don't crank out enough billing codes, the bean counter is going to say, look, the two doctors over here saw 30 patients today. You only saw 15. Stop this crap about talking about nutrition and exercise and sleep. You need to sell drugs. If you don't sell drugs, we're going to let you go. So they have to do it. And if they talk to the patients, still, they're going to be going home, 2-3 hours late every night. They're going to be exhausted. Plus, if you sell the drug, you then have meet the standard of care guidelines. So you can't be sued, okay? You can't be sued. Even if the patient dies, so what? You can't be sued. Versus if you do this nutritional talk therapy and all this other stuff and give them advice and empower them, you have not followed the standard of care. You didn't sell the drug. If the patient has a bad outcome, they could sue you and say you didn't follow the standard of care. But they don't tell you that the standard of care is the lowest common denominator for drug addicts, alcoholics, old confused people, unconscious people. They don't tell you that what you really should seek is optimal care. And optimal care is all this talk therapy and all this stuff, but it's not reimbursed. They intentionally don't reimburse it because they don't want people to start using it. In addition, when you go to medical meetings, and it's the same in all the Western hospitals, okay, what'll happen is there'll be some bean counter that says our hospital's generating so much money, so many billing codes, compared to some other hospital across town or in a nearby state, they're generating more. We need to work harder. What I'm trying to say is their definition of how well a hospital is doing is its productivity in generating money. No one ever talks about cures, and they never are going to talk about cures because if you talked about cures, somebody would come along with the low-fat vegan diet and the pillars of health, and they would cure more patients. And they go, oh, no, we can't have that. We can't let anything compete with drugs.
Yeah, I know.
So they'll never talk about outcomes.
You said before, they don't track patient outcomes, right? Because all I care about is results, right? But the average person going in, I think, thinks that their medical professional is going to know what's best. They don't even ask about results, right?
Yeah. They don't know anything about nutrition, epidemiology, toxicology, or the things you said, the social support pillars of health. Okay. They don't know anything about that. Okay. And they don't get paid to do it. So they're not going to do it and they're never going to do it. And it's never going to change because it's run by a bunch of billionaires and they want their money coming in. They don't give a rat's ass about the stupid peasant proles. They consider them vermin. Okay. So they want the drug sold and that's not going to change.
Okay. Let me ask you some other question here that I think might wrap everything up here, kind of bring it all together. This is something I've thought about before. Well, let's say your dad said that you didn't feel well, right? And he's seeing all these other patients, or any psychiatrist is seeing patients who have this condition that's, I'd say a lot of it's true. Like, you weren't feeling well because you broke up with your girlfriend. I mean, people have incidents where they're out of balance. They're not feeling the way they want to feel. It's true. Well, the question is, the society is set up in such a way that this whole thing is broken, right? I mean, we're seeing you're talking about these degenerative systems that are pervasive throughout the medical industry, right? I mean, if someone starts to think about that, they're not going to feel well either. So maybe not feeling right about it is actually the right place to be in,
Right,
and
right.
if someone's going to try to medicate you, right, if they're going to try to put pharmaceuticals in you so you don't think about it, well, that's going to allow that degenerative system to continue. Whereas someone has a chance, if they can think about this, try to think of it other ways, like you're telling our audience here, you're saying you got to look at it in a different way, right? You have to take a different approach. And that's maybe the best way to be, as opposed to, so I'm saying a diagnosis in a messed up society that's off of balance may be a good thing. Is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think it is. I actually think it is. And like Carl Jung had said, the psychiatrist, he said in psychology, he said it is the patient's story which holds the key to their recovery. And there was also a guy by the name, he was a Polish psychiatrist. I think his name is like Kazimierz Dobronsky. And he talked about what's called the theory of personality disintegration and reintegration with regard to something happens in your life and you're sad about it. You're disappointed. You have a loss, a setback, a failure. And you sort of think about it, obsess on it for a while, and then you have to take your energy and frustration and you have to refocus it into something good. So disintegration is you have to give up on what previously was going on in your life, your previous expectations, and then put your energy into something good and focus it so you can do something useful in that sense. Yeah, I see the ducks swimming by you.
Yeah, okay. They're making noise.
Yeah, and so the way I would describe that, like, here's what I think is useful. Like, how can I give somebody advice? What I would say is like the keys to being happy, all right? And I'll even tell you this. It's like my son said to me not that long ago. This is a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. He goes, "Dad, why are you so happy?" He says, "Out of everybody in the family, you're the happiest person, but you have the worst life. Your life sucks. All you do is you work all the time. When you're not working, you're like writing a book or making a YouTube video. You don't do anything. Why don't you go to the beach with Mom?" I said, "Well, I don't like sunscreen. I can just stand out in the backyard for an hour or something." He's like, "Well, why don't you, go to this restaurant?" "I don't like going to that restaurant. The food there sucks." And anyways, I said, I know who I am. I'm sort of an academic genius, and I like writing books, and I like studying these things. That's what I'm going to do. That makes me happy. And so anyways, what am I getting at? I'm going to get at a couple quotes about happiness. James Watson had said, "An animal is happy when it does what it's meant to do. A horse is happy when it runs." And so basically, I think what a person should do is look at their life, analyze it, and ask themselves, where's my time best spent? You got to spend about 1/3 of your life asleep. You're going to spend probably about 1/3 of your life doing something to make money. Hopefully it'll be something you like and you think is useful, but you got to make some money to pay your bills. There's no way around that. All right. We don't have a trust fund. All right. So that's number 2. So then you only have a couple hours left, 6 to 8 hours maybe. And that's where you can do something unique and original. By the way, you can kind of steal a little bit of time, like when you're at work, for example, watch an educational video if you have a free moment to watch a video. Little tricks that I do is I always have a book in the bathroom. So every time I go in the bathroom, I read a book. Well, you have to figure it out for yourself, but try to get the most out of your time. But anyways, you got that little window of time, 6 to 8 hours a day, and you focus yourself. You say, what do I want to accomplish with this? And, it might be if your kids are young, you're going to be taking care of your kids. Okay, you want to be a parent. That's nice. That'll make you happy. That's the most valuable way you can spend your time. But you'll come to the conclusion later on, your time is best spent doing something. What I'm trying to say is, if you just look at your life as a random event by chance, you're probably not going to be that happy, because having a sense of purpose to focus your energy, that makes you happier, because then you feel like this was the best I could do. And with the time I have, I did the best I could do. It's like you respect yourself. You have a high self-esteem because you say, you know what, given my circumstances in life and my abilities and my whole situation, my context, this is the best I can do. And I'm doing it. So I'm happy with that. And that makes you happy. So it's like Schopenhauer had said, a man is happy not because of what he does, but because of who he is. It's impossible to have a happy life. Don't focus on that. He says, try to have a heroic life, because if you try to have a heroic life, doing the best you can, you'll respect yourself and you'll be happy. And I actually think that's true.
So you need to find your purpose. That's what you're saying, right? And you need to
yes.
And you need to work at it. You got to work at that purpose.
Right. You have to really refine it down and say, what is the best I could do? And I will do that. And So that works.
Okay. Well, that's it. I mean, I wish that folks would understand that. I mean, I think that maybe social media has made things even worse these days because people, look at everyone's curated perfect life up there on social media and they feel like they're inadequate, right? I mean, I think that
Yeah.
that works against people too on a whole other level now.
Yeah, it's very dishonest. For example, I've heard a lot of girls, they start being very depressed when they go to Instagram or something because there's some clever girls with computers who've learned how to use artificial intelligence and these other editing tools, and they make themselves totally beautiful, perfect tens. And these other girls are like, gee, look at all these perfect tens. I'll never be able to get a boyfriend or a husband. And they start doing this self-mutilating behavior or cutting themselves, facial piercing, all this crazy stuff. And so what I'm saying is you can't be another person. You can only be the best version of yourself. So become the best version of yourself and figure out what's the best you could do. The other thing I would say is try to figure out what you like and try to figure out how you could work that into your life. And what I'm getting at is, Goethe had said, in order for a man to learn a complex subject, he must love it, because you have to be interested enough in something that you can stick with it through the tedious part and through the frustrations and setbacks in order to really become an expert at it. And so those things also bring you happiness in the long run. To pursue something difficult that's good, interesting, and worthwhile long term. And, you have to go through the humiliation of being a baby beginner and making mistakes at first, but then you progress and it'll bring you happiness.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, I wish that this was taught to everyone as part of a curriculum in early school days, right? I mean, people would turn out so much better. And even if they messed it up then, I wish it was part of the medical system. But like you said, it probably will never be. But, at least maybe some enlightened doctors like yourself will be able to get that out to folks like you're doing right now. So, I mean, I really appreciate that you're doing that.
Yeah, you do the best you can. I actually think, people are sort of brainwashed into thinking that the system is there to help them. The system is not there to help you. The system is run by, billionaire people who don't want you to compete with their children, okay? So they deliberately make the school stupid. Grade school, you ask anybody, what did you learn in grade school and high school that you could remember, any adult? And you know what they're going to tell you? Oh, I remember learning how to type. And they maybe had one or two teachers that were nice to them and encouraged them in some area, but hardly anybody remembers almost anything. And it's designed that way. I'll tell you what school's like. Do you ever see the movie Cool Hand Luke with Paul Newman, where the warden was pissed off at him because he tried to escape, and he has him come into the field by the prison cells, and he says, "Okay, dig a ditch." And he digs a ditch, and he says, "How come now you got dirt on my grass? Put that dirt back in the ditch." So he has put the dirt back in the ditch. He says, "Okay, now dig a ditch." He has to dig a ditch, put it back. That's what school does. Memorize a vocabulary list for the test on Friday. You forget everything. Then you do the same thing next week. It's a totally stupid waste of time. Real learning has a purpose, answers a question you're trying to answer. You remember driver's ed, how to drive. You remember learning how to talk to girls. You remember typing because it's useful. Nobody remembers vocabulary list.
Yeah. I think that, I feel like in a way that there's like a mental health crisis in a way. I feel like everybody seems to have a diagnosis these days. And like I was saying, well, maybe these diagnoses are actually correct because society is so screwed up. Who would possibly be okay in a society that's so screwed up, right?
Well, yeah. Well, let me actually go there real quick, because I spent a long time trying to understand why more and more people are becoming demented. Also, if you look at younger people, there's a tremendously increased incidence of anxiety, suicide, drug abuse, all kinds of bad things. And so I went through it, and I went through it in my book here, Food, Mood, and IQ. I go through all the things. Basically, the food system is poisoned, okay? All these non-organic foods are full of toxins. The corn's all sprayed with atrazine. The soy is all sprayed with glyphosate. There's all these mold inhibitors that are mitochondrial inhibitors. All these toxins are contributing to decreased mental health. A cell phone, a low-power microwave transmitter, people are holding it next to their brain all day. Not a good idea. Should be using a speakerphone. If you have a choice, hardwire your computers rather than Wi-Fi them in your house. There's other things you can do. Turn your bedroom into an EMF sanctuary to lower that, because EMF opens up electromotive force. It opens up voltage-gated calcium channels in the brain. And so you want to give your brain a break from that to the extent you can. Their brains are being overstimulated. And also for children, for example, high school, college age, the more they use social media and cell phones, the more depressed they are, the worse their school performance is, the more so-called mental illness they have, the more anxiety they have, the less happy they are, they rate themselves. And so, real happiness comes from old-fashioned stuff that we know, having meaningful relationships, making progress in, something that's important to you, whatever that might be.
Right. Right. So also, you mentioned forest bathing earlier in this discussion. What do you think about just submersing yourself in nature and quiet areas that don't have, you mentioned EMF, don't have cell service. They're totally out, outside the grid like that. Is that somewhat beneficial to people's health?
That would be very good for people to be able to kind of like get away from it all for a while, let their body sort of recover to baseline, let them realize what life could be like. Because a lot of people are so sort of confused and jittery at baseline, they begin to think it's normal.
Right.
And a great secret of strength is to simplify, because you want to avoid distractions. If you take all your energy and you focus it on one task, you can be pretty good at that. But what I see a lot of people is they're distracted. They're all over the place. Their cell phone text messages going off every 15 minutes. They can't really concentrate. They're checking their email. They're all distracted in 5 different directions. And then they're drinking all this caffeine and they're sleep deprived. You want to simplify stuff. Like, for example, I wanted to write a book some years ago and I was too busy. So I started reading about people who wrote books under difficult situations. And they would do things like they would totally simplify their life. They would minimize social interaction. They would go to sleep really early, wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and write for a couple hours before going to work. Okay. When I first started writing books, I was working full-time as a doctor. I still am. But what I would do is I got rid of my cell phone. I basically would almost never answer an email. And my wife, the way we worked with our properties at that time was really her house pretty much. So I refused to do anything in the house. Well, what I'm trying to say is you need to find energy somewhere to do whatever it is you want to do. And one of the fastest ways to find energy is go through a list of everything that happens in your day and avoid anything you don't need. And you'll be amazed at how much energy comes out of that. But also, like I said, too, you get much better brain function if you avoid all these toxic foods. You want to eat low-fat, organic, no oil, none of this processed food stuff. This processed food is full of chemicals. These are just ways to build yourself up because the world tries to knock you down. You can look like Super Mario Brothers video game. You go through the video game, and if you do the good stuff, you get energy points, the greens. You do the bad stuff, the red decreases your energy points. So what I'm saying is do all the good stuff, only the good stuff, and don't do the bad stuff.
Yeah, gamify it. Yeah, and I also wanted to point out, you and I have talked before in interviews, and we have focused on the food. The food is super important. It's just not the main subject of this video, but we also have our own healthy vegan food standard. If everyone wants to know more, it's basically what you're saying, Dr. Rogers. It's at healthyveganfood.info, and we base all of our own real world events off that because it's hard to go out in the real world and not harm yourself, right? I mean, it's nearly impossible nowadays. So that's why we do events that we do. And also, how can folks get your book on food, mood, and IQ? Where can they get that?
Oh, yeah. This book, Food, Mood, and IQ, it's available at Amazon.com. All my books are at Amazon.com. And, I make videos at my YouTube channel, Peter Rogers, MD.
Yes. Yeah. And you're doing an excellent job. And for all the reasons you said, I'm very thankful that you take the time to get this knowledge out to people because it's probably the most important thing. And I think you're the same as I am. All I care about is positive results for people, right? And with the paradigm that we're in right now, you can't expect that. But with your teachings, I think that the average person that understands them should expect positive results, and that's a great thing.
Right. And, and I also think, you have to have an attitude of gratitude. You say, well, look, I'm half screwed in life, but at least I'm not totally screwed. I'll make the most out of the opportunity and resources that I have.
All right. Well, that's a great note to end on. Thank you very much, Dr. Rogers. I look forward to, having another enlightening talk in the near future. So thanks again.
Thanks. Me too. Thanks.